Hello everyone, welcome back to Starsector. A couple of months ago, the devs dropped an update that inhabited the Abyss. The once empty and relatively harmless corner of the map is now filled with hostile jellyfish with laser beams and the threat. Both of these factions are incredibly strong, use a variety of exotic weapons, and were created to make you as miserable as possible. But with a little bit of skill and a lot of YouTuber luck, I set out to harvest their technologies and conquer the Abyss for myself. However, before we start, ladies and gentlemen, please embrace Dick Payne. Our adventure began outside a jungle planet. From here, I would head over to the Tritachyon Corporation, purchase as many drugs as possible, and begin selling them to the poor. However, after the smear campaign you guys left on my last video, we were going to do things a little differently. Starting with banning myself from the black market, which means no drug smuggling, no arms dealing, just a painful 30% tariff on every transaction. So that begs the question, how was I going to make money? I flew around in hyperspace pondering this topic until some pirates ambushed me outside Syndria, seeking to rob me of both my credits and my newfound morals. Going into battle, it became clear to me that I was woefully under-equipped, as I spent the whole fight chasing a wolf, getting repeatedly shot in the face with a mining blaster, until I eventually admitted defeat and limped away. Barely escaping with my life, I fled to the safety of the Tritachyon Corporation, where upon opening the market, we saw them. So sweet, so colourful, so profitable.
Just one trade. They won't know.
Having to resist the urge to break bad, I instead purchased some fuel and set off to complete 2 exploration quests that I had accepted. One to analyze a domain era probe, and another to investigate a derelict ship. Our first stop then was the derelict ship, where we found not one, but an entire graveyard.
Oh, damn.
Running the sensor package on the Enforcer and getting paid 40,000 credits in the process, I was able to recover the ship alongside a level 5 commander. Not a bad find, you would say, if it wasn't for the fact that she was timid. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize losing a battle and hibernating in space turns you into such a pussy. Anyway, we recovered the Enforcer and also had the option to recover a Fury. But I wasn't quite ready to take on the responsibility of a high-tech ship and left a marker to remind me to come back for it later. Yeah, as you had probably guessed, I forgot. Next stop was the probe. Upon scanning it, I received our payment and then killed some automated drones for their souls. With my 2 quests completed, I returned to the core worlds and handed in the gamma cores to the hedge, as this just seemed like the right thing to do. Now, there was a reason I was doing these quests, aside from the money. I was searching for a certain data core that had to be returned to the Glacier Academy. Once completed, this would allow me to unlock a new questline, which will lead us to something, let's say, spicy. Thankfully, we didn't have to wait too long for our core, which we found alongside some low-tech blueprints, which was nice. What wasn't so nice were the Luddic Path fanatics that ambushed me. Now, you could argue that funding extremist organizations doesn't really align with my redemption arc, but I was outnumbered, outgunned, and didn't really want to get hammered by a bunch of fanatics, so I paid the bribe. Was told my soul wasn't yet lost to the machines, and arrived at the academy where we met Cornelius. After introducing ourselves, my name is Dick Payne. I collected my reward, and then took the time to make some adjustments to my Enforcer. This is where the new codex proved incredibly useful, helping me track down where specific weapons were commonly sold, like chain guns, which according to the codex are frequently found on Luddic Path planets. And before you start complaining about me buying weapons from the Luddic Path, I just have one word for you. Shut. After refitting my navy, it was time to get some revenge on the pirates. So I went to Syndria, did a little dance with their fleet, and then introduced them to some torpedoes. I don't care how strong you are, when the torpedo spam comes out, you're not winning. After the battle, I popped into Syndria to grab some fuel, only to find that Cornelius had left us a voicemail.
Dick Payne. I mean, you don't have to share everything with me, but alright.
In short, he offered us a vast fortune in credits for our services. Heading back to the academy, the job was to attach a scientific hardware package to a sensor array, which would give us the coordinates to a location, and then, and I quote, explore what is to be explored and find what is to be found. Shortly after, he winked at me, admitted he was bought and paid for by the Tritachyon Corporation, and I left. As we were leaving the core worlds, I picked up a survey quest, which happened to be at our destination. Upon arrival, I beat up a domain fleet guarding a probe, granting us both a gamma core and a level. I then headed towards the sensor array, snuck past a pirate fleet, and then ran the package. It spat out the coordinates for a nameless rock where apparently something violent had occurred, which is always a good sign, especially when the coordinates are located in the abyss. Making our way into the abyss, we were immediately engulfed in a thick darkness and our burn speed was limited to 5. Crawling through the darkness, we eventually arrived at a gravity well. Inside, we found a dead planet and a single ship in orbit. In surveying the planet, we discovered its surface showed signs of heavy orbital bombardment from many cycles ago. Scanning the ship, we discovered it was the legendary Onslaught Mark I. While exploring the ship, our crew picked up a message which read, "Threat detected." After learning the enemy was identified only as the threat, we received multiple warnings and it became clear that something was coming to kill us. Thankfully, we were able to recover the Onslaught. However, this version had been extensively modified into an automated ship. This sadly meant that I couldn't pilot the ship myself. Aside from that, it had 2 thick armor modules, no shield, and 2 massive front-mounted guns called adjudicators. Installing the gamma core we found earlier, we finally had our first encounter with the threat, who only had one thing to say to us: interdictorate, proact, unfabricate? Now, I don't know about you, but I definitely don't want to find out what being unfabricated feels like. But we don't have to worry about things like that, because I had the Onslaught Mark I to hide behind. We ran headfirst into the threat and died. Well, that's not good. I feel like that's not meant to die. This was then followed up by the rest of my fleet. Reloading the game, it turns out my last quick save was back in the core worlds, so we were going to have to run it back. However, during attempt 2, I may have made some mistakes. By heading straight to the sensor array and then the ship, I missed out on the level up into field repairs and a gamma core from the domain. So going into battle, my Onslaught had no pilot and about 100 hull. Attempt 3. Okay, this time, I needed a plan. Right. We spawn in at the academy, fly over to the sensor array, go in, take care of the domain, grab the gamma core, use a level up to grab field repairs, salvage the Onslaught, kill the threat, have a cup of tea, and wait for all this to blow over. The battle went about as well as you expect. Oh my god. My fleet got absolutely wrecked while the Onslaught managed to just about scrape a victory. After the battle, only 15 crew lived to tell the tale of the threat. But what did we actually learn about them? To start with, their ships are surrounded by fragments, which their missile weapons convert into different types of swarms. Each swarm does a different type of damage, and they can also build attack swarms that fly around and zap everything. Having a quick read in the codex, we also learned that these ships rely on the overseers in order to use their ship systems. After recovering my entire fleet, I limped home, showed off my fancy new ship to Cornelius, who called it a fake, and then hung up on me. What a c***. After returning home and not getting paid, I took our Onslaught to the shipyard for some upgrades. To be honest, I only installed reinforced bulkheads and expanded magazines before realizing what this ship really needs was an alpha core. Finding an alpha core meant it was time to leave the core worlds again. Earlier, I'd discovered the location of a survey ship, which usually leads to a mothership. Motherships usually have an alpha core alongside some pretty tasty loot. Sadly for us though, the survey ship didn't have the location of the mothership, but I did have the coordinates for some widespread ruins. Inside that system, we found a research station with a nice collection of hull mods, a champion blueprint, some drugs which we left behind, and a corrupted nanoforge. Heading back to the core worlds with all our loot, I was hailed by a Tritachyon employee who requested that I meet Zunya. Is that how it's said? The same person who was funding Cornelius. You know, that piece of shit who didn't pay me. Long story short, the creepy lady paid me 1 million credits to run some scans on my Onslaught, and an additional 100k for the recordings of our encounter with the threat. Which was easy money, I guess. What could possibly go wrong selling Secrets of the Abyss to a megacorp? Having concluded my business with Tritech, I returned to searching for an alpha core. Along the way, I defeated some remnants, surveyed a few planets, and found an Anubis. Having a look at the ship, all I can say is, this ship is interesting. A cruiser with 3 large weapon slots, a deployment cost of 18, and Tempora Shell as its system. However, this ship has a debuff known as design compromises. which reduces the ship's flux dissipation and capacity by 40%, reduces the range of ballistic weapons by 15%, rate of fire of missiles by 50%, and flux generation of energy weapons increased by 100%, which meant my plan to put 3 auto-pulse lasers on it did not work. But don't let this ship fool you. As with 3 Paladin PD systems, this ship still goes hard. While I was kitting out the Anubis, I went to the bar to see if I could find any work, and I met a scientist who wanted me to locate an alpha core. Now I know what you're thinking, he's just going to accept the quest and then steal the core for himself. But unfortunately for you, that mindset doesn't fit in with my whole good guy theme of this run. So after killing the remnants guarding the stash, as much as it pains me,
place the IQ in a shielded crate and send it to as soon as possible.
I placed the alpha core in a secure container for collection. On a positive note, we did get a handful of useful blueprints and discover the location of another survey ship. This time it led us to a mothership. Guarded by a handful of the main ships, they weren't much of a problem, but nor was the mothership, as our onslaught had developed a rather unique way of dealing with her. Why does the onslaught have to try and fuck everything? Stop trying to fuck the mothership, for Christ's sake. But hey, it worked, so I guess I can't really complain. With the mothership dead, we recovered our alpha core. Placing it inside the onslaught, we had gone from having just 3 combat skills to 7. Now the smart thing would be to fully integrate the core, which would have given it an additional skill, but I forgot. Oh yeah, and I also got a pristine nanoforge, which is pretty good, I guess. Heading home, I bumped into some pirates and watched the Anubis do Anubis things, and thought it was time for a little dip into the old abyss. Was my fleet ready? Probably not, but it was okay because our boy serial 2F38C807 was going to carry us to victory. So setting off on the long journey across the galaxy, we arrived at the abyss with slightly less fuel than I would have liked. Pushing deeper, I explored for, well, anything. Hello? After flying around aimlessly, I finally stumbled across an abyssal light. Now, I had heard that some of the lights had a little surprise behind them, but thankfully, this one was okay. However, it didn't take too long before we found something a little suspicious. Call me crazy, but the spooky music has just started, and they're a different shade of color. Upon touching the light, we were greeted with, wait a minute, is that what I think it is? Anyway, this is how my first encounter with the shroud went. Oh my god! Look at the size of that thing! Wait, oh my god! No! What is happening to me? Oh. Yeah, so the first encounter did not go very well. Maybe picking the weight option was not the best of ideas, as depending on what you choose, depends on what size manifestation you fight. Okay, attempt 2. This time I picked the much safer option 3, which put us against a lesser manifestation. Oh, that doesn't look too bad. With no big bastard to deal with, this should be easier as the only thing we had to worry about was the eye, because it could do this. Holy shit! So I thought I'd rush it down with the enforcer. You might have a fucking big laser, but I've got a load of hammers. Those hammers did nothing to it. It did absolutely nothing. What the fuck? It just brushed off 8 hammers like it was nothing. Ah! After my enforcer was destroyed, which was followed up by pretty much the rest of my fleet, I once again watched the onslaught carry my stupid ass to victory. But I did learn a few things. 1. Daka is king, while missiles and fighters were basically useless. 2. Kill the eye as quickly as possible before, well, this happens. Ah! And finally, these things drop barely any fuel and supplies, but they do drop some shiny new items. After definitely reading all of the lore, exotic matter. It cost me a story point for you to tell me it's exotic matter. These items can be turned into unique weapons and hull mods. You have the Thunderhead, which I installed on the onslaught, which fires off bolts of lightning at whatever you're shooting at. The lens, which acts like a mini EMP, and another one, but we'll talk about that one later. For weapons, I unlocked something called a pseudo-particle jet, which I can only describe looks like a stream of kidney damage. With my shiny new toys, I tested them on some pirates. I wield the power of the abyss now. I wield the power of the abyss. It's a few remnants and this guardian defending a cryosleeper. Which leads me into my next grand idea, colonizing a planet just outside of the abyss. This would act as a kind of base of operations, so I didn't have to keep traveling backwards and forwards from the core worlds. So after surveying every system bordering the abyss, the only semi-decent option turned out to be the system that we started in. With a single arid world, a handful of barren worlds and a gas giant, this system was far from perfect, but it would do for a base of operations. With the help of our sleeper, our capital's growth peaked at 28%, allowing our planet to quickly reach level 5. While it grew, I let the onslaught loose on another mothership and some nearby bounties. Notably, we encountered some Syndrian deserters, whose poor executor was no match for my Mark I. However, the rapid growth on our planets didn't come without a problem, starting with me ignoring the Colonial Crisis tab, which led to a pirate raid. The raid itself wasn't too much of an issue, but the inspection fleets, commerce raiders, and enforcer fleets, they were the problem. To deal with this issue, I ignored it and shot myself back into the abyss and made my way over to the limbo system. To no one's surprise, this didn't work, and the League planned to blockade my system. After clearing out the limbo system, which is located in the corner of the abyss, I shot myself home to prepare for the blockade. The blockade consisted of 15 fleets, and considering how weak my fleet was, things were not looking good. However, nearby was a deserter from the hedge, whose fleet had a couple of onslaught Mark IIs which we could use. After a fairly close fight where I witnessed some onslaught on onslaught violence, I was able to recover one of them. Running home and slapping on some shiny new guns, it was time to put an end to the League's blockade, which actually wasn't causing me too many problems. Defeating the blockade isn't actually too difficult, as all you have to do is destroy their support fleets, and then the blockade is lifted. It's just killing them before they kill you. After finding where both fleets were stationed, I rushed down the first one. Their pathetic midline ships were no match for my low-tech Dakar, and we crushed the first fleet. After defeating them, I took the fight to a couple of detachments behind my battle station, before finding, then killing, their second support fleet, sending the entire blockade home, and a nice little buff of 10% accessibility for our troubles. Anyway, with the blockade defeated, it was time to dip our hands back into the old honey jar, that being the abyss, and in the form of killing some more lesser manifestations. After defeating them, we collected some more shrouded material and discovered we could craft an abyssal glare. Requiring a large energy slot, I mounted it on a champion and watched it bully this dominator. On the topic of ships, this is what my fleet had evolved into. Right now, we were split into two, the aggressors and the snipers. The aggressors were led by the Onslaught Mark I. Their job was to run headfirst into the enemy and unload in their face, while I sat back with the Mark II and a couple of dominators giving support from a distance. And this worked fairly well against the lesser manifestations. So I think it was time to step up and take down one of their stronger fleets. The battle began with the Eye decimating one of my ramparts, but thanks to its thick armor, it was able to withstand the attack. It was supporting the Mark I, which of course ran headfirst into the big bastard. I, on the other hand, was busy trying to keep the Eye at bay. Ah! Oh! God, it just tore through all my armor. A few moments later, my Mark I finally took down the Maw, and that created the space for me to push through and take down the Eye. With the two main targets dead, I may have gotten a little overconfident and gotten myself surrounded. With my engines disabled and overloaded, I managed to just slip away and let the rest of my fleet clean up, giving us our first W against the greater threats. With the defeat of the Shroud, we were granted another hull mod to play with, the Shrouded Mantle. However, using this hull mod, and I quote, "You consider the undeniable possibility that the Luddic Faith would view any use of this technology as literally demonic." Very good. The hull mod allows your ship to hopefully recool away from danger. I also took this moment to make a few changes to my fleet, notably adding automated repair arm to a majority of my ships and stripping the Mark I of its integrated targeting feed, which I probably should have done a long time ago. After spending some time hunting the Shroud, I was getting pretty good at it. Personally, I think fighting the Shroud is significantly easier than killing the threat, which leads into a nice segue. With all the Shroud technologies harvested, it was time to take on the threat. This meant we had to deliberately jump into gravity worlds in hopes of getting ambushed. It didn't take too long to find them, and you may be thinking what I'm thinking at this point. First, why is that tiny fleet considered 4 stars? And second, what the fuck is that? Well, my friends, that's the capital class ship for the threat called a fabricator, which can construct new ships during battle. So not only did I have to deal with the original dozen ships, I had to deal with anything this thing built, which as you can imagine is incredibly painful. Now their ships are named appropriately, but I'll give you a quick TLDR. Skirmishers are annoying, assaults fucking hurt, hives piss out endless fragments, lines hate dying, overseers support the previous ships, and finally these assholes think they're playing Age of Empires. After the battle, it was safe to say the threat were way more of a pain in the ass than the Shroud. With their defeat, we salvaged a ton of fuel and supplies and some shiny new weapons and hull mods. The Fragment Swarm, Secondary Fabricator, and the Fragment Coordinator. Once you've installed the Fragment Swarm mod, this will allow your ship to produce fragments, while the other two hull mods just increase your production. Building in the two that increase production and placing a couple of swarm launchers on the ship, I was now able to give the threat a taste of their own medicine, as once the ship had generated enough fragments, they could be converted into attack swarms. Feeling confident, I picked a fight with a fleet which had 3 fabricators, and at this point, I had developed a simple strategy. Start by capturing a majority of the map and then slowly grind through their ships until they're trapped at the top. Now stuck at the top of the map, I could easily deal with all their fragments with my spam of Devastator cannons and Anubis, then group up the capitals and take down their fabricators one at a time, and to probably everyone's surprise, this strategy actually worked. After defeating their fleet, I scooped up a ton of fuel and supplies and rushed home to deal with a pirate raid. Now, I don't think these poor pirates were quite ready for what they were about to encounter. Their numbers were no match for my fleet as I met them in hyperspace and tore them to pieces. In the end, I have no idea how many pirates I killed, but it was enough for them to permanently leave me alone. Oh, and then the Luddic Path tried to kill me. Something about being demonic, which I kind of get. But in response of their accusations, I bombed their homes. With all the abyssal technologies under my belt, I suppose there was only really one thing to do, to take down the strongest fleets I could find, starting with the Transcendent Manifestation. Made up of a Maw, 3 eyes, and a bunch of other things, I thought this was going to be painful, but it wasn't. Turns out all you need to poach jellyfish was thick armor and a lot of Devastator cannons. To proclaim dominance over the Abyss, I did try to colonize some planets in Limbo, but sadly, you can't. Instead, I created a wormhole which gave me easy access to the Deep Abyss, where I found a gate holder, but I didn't have enough resources to bring it back online. For the next hour or so, I roamed around killing both Threat and Shroud fleets alike, and creating new ship designs with their technology. My favorite ended up being this Executor, that followed the simple concept of my previous designs, but with 2 abyssal glares instead of auto-pulse cannons. Oh, and also these Void Blasters, which look and sound very cool. Anything else I found, I sold. Is selling all this stuff to try and take a good idea? Probably not, but they are going to pay me 3.2 million for it. With that, I think it was time to call it. I had created my small empire, harvested all the technologies from the Abyss, and was pretty much unkillable at this point. Anyway, I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you to my Patreons and channel members for throwing money at me. And as always, new videos every...